In Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Meshumer, B'Shum ben Elazar. Chachamim tignu hem l'bnot Yisrael u'b'sua masayim u'alman amana. That the Chachamim are the ones who established this concept of ksuba. That the concept that when a husband marries, when a groom marries a bride, the sages instituted that all the daughters of Israel are supposed to get money in the event of a death or divorce. If she's a virgin, she gets 200. If she's a widow, she gets 100. And since the rabbis are the ones who instituted this, they believed him. Shem Amar Pesach Pasuach Matzasi goes part and parcel of the fact that they gave the ksuba. When they instituted the ksuba, they also said that if on the day of the wedding, right after the wedding, he says Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, I found her Pesach to be open, Neman, he's believed. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so what does this help the rabbis with their takana? How do they help anything? So I'll tell you how they helped, because we have a presumptive status that a person is not going to, the presumption is a person is not going to be busy with his suuda umafsida. A person is not going to do a whole meal and then turn around and lose the meal and so therefore, since we have a chazaka that a person is not going to work so hard for nothing, and if he had really hated her, he wouldn't have lost his meal for nothing. So we just wouldn't have done the meal. So therefore, for this reason, the sages instituted that if a person claims right away Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, you won't believe him. So the Gemara says, Tana hoil the kanas chachamim, hoil knas chachamim hu, otik ba'el menazibora. So the sages said, we learned that since this is a knas of the chachamim, so the Gemara says that we learned in the Brisa that since this whole idea of a ksuba is a fine from the sages will institute the fine. They say that she only gets to collect the ksuba from the ziboris. There are three classes of property: class A, class B, class C. They all have the same value, but the husband will get to choose if he doesn't want to pay her from the class A property. He likes his Park Avenue apartment. He likes to show his friends his good class property. So he could pay her from the property that's class C property. The ziboris is the worst of the property because it's a fine. So the Gemara says, Kanasa, my Kanasa, what did he do wrong to get fined? Why is he getting a fine? What did he do wrong here? She's the one who he's accusing of adultery. So the Gemara says, Ela Ema, read it like this. Oh, the Takanas Chachamim hu, since this whole institution of Ksuba is a Takan of the sages, Lo Tikba Elamani Ziboris. She only gets to collect it from the Ziboris. The sages instituted, she only gets to collect it from the class C property. She doesn't get to choose which property she gets. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, so that was a position of Rabbi Shimon Elazar, who says that the whole idea of a ksuba was dirabanan, was rabbinic. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says ksubas isha min Torah. He says no, ksubas isha is biblical. Ksubas isha is biblical. So the Gemara says, "Mi Rabbi Shimon Gamliel." How does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel really say ksubas isha is biblical? Does he really say that? Well, I'll tell you, but we learned in a brisa kesef yishkol that in the case of a person was mifata, he seduced a young girl into marrying him or to having relations with him. So the pasuk says, "Kesef yishkol kamor habasulos," that father will take from the husband kamor habasulos, like the price of a dowry. Kamor habasulos. That's like the price that said it, that if you assault a woman, the sages said you have to pay a 50 shekel fine. So too, that's the mohar, the price for her basulas. So if you're mefater, that's what you pay. That this is the same as the bridal price for the virgin. And mikan, from this point, from this idea, samku chachamim uksuvas isha min Torah. Based upon this, the rabbi said that ksuvas isha is biblical. This is the basis for the idea that the ksuvas isha is biblical. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Kesubos isha eina midivrei Torah. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that Kesubos isha is not biblical. El midivrei sofrim is rabbinic. So how could we have just said above that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that a ksuba is biblical, and here we just say it's rabbinic? So the Gemara says, okay, epoch, reverse the positions. Here Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says it's biblical, not that it's rabbinic. The Gemara says, "My chazis the apkas basrai." So why are we reversing the second source? Epoch kamaisa, reverse the first source. Gemara says, because we have a third source. We have another source where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that a ksuba is a biblical to Tanan. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, how do we know that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that Kesubos isha is biblical? Because we learned in the Mishnah. We're going to get to this, God willing, in 100 days. It says, on Daf Yod, no lami mos kapotkia. That what's the scenario here? And Rashi tells us in the Parak Basra Tanan, we learned. Now let's say you marry a woman in Eretz Yisrael and you divorce her in kapotkia, you give her from the money of Eretz Yisrael, which is considered to be less than the money of kapotkia. But because you married her in Israel, you get to pay her based upon the currency of where you were when you got married. Let's say you married her in kapotkia and you divorced her in Eretz Yisrael. Then you also can give her the money of Eretz Yisrael. And how do we know? How do we know that we follow that he's lenient with the payment? So Rashbag said, so that's the Chachamim, where Rashbag says, no salami mos kapotkia shenis ave bahen kishar malva to kasavar ksuba diaraisa. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, you have to give to her even though she shows up in Eretz Yisrael, and that's where the divorce is. You have to pay her in the money of kapotkia because that's where the loan or the bond was established. That's where the bond was established. So therefore, that's what you have to pay her. Therefore, that's what you have to pay her. So the Gemara says, that's proof that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says it's biblical because he's saying you have to pay her by the place where there was a shibud on it, where there was a lien, and he says the ksuba is diaraisa, like all liens, that this is what you have to pay. So the Gemara says, Ibai same or alternatively, Kula Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The whole brisa, the whole second source where we said that Kamora Basulos, it's all Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and this is how you read it. It's missing some words. This is how you read it. From here, the rabbi stated that ksuba is biblical. Ksuba salmana ain't midivrei Torah al midivrei sofrim. But the ksuba of a widow, that a ksuba of a virgin is biblical. But the ksuba of a widow, that's rabbinic. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer ksuba salmana ain't midivrei Torah al midivrei sofrim. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that ksuba of a widow is not midivrei Torah, but from midivrei sofrim, which is rabbinic. Sofrim is rabbinic. So says the Gemara. Ahuda Asla coming to Rav Nachman. There was once a person and came in front of Rav Nachman, this groom, and he says, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. He says, yeah, I found her Pesach to be Pasuach. I married her and she's not a virgin. Rav Nachman says to the people of his household, Rav Nachman was the Av Bezin, he had the right to do this. He says, Aspu Kufrei, hit him with a stick, meaning give him lashes. And they were made from special thorns on them, very harsh. Because this guy's claiming Pesach Patzuach, that proves that he's experienced man in the ways of intercourse. And so therefore, how else would he know this? How else would he know what's open and what's not? So therefore, Mivarchata Chavitoe, that the harlots from the city of Mivarchata, they're lying down in front of him at all times for his nus, and so therefore he's an expert. That's why he knows what's a Pesach Pasuach. So this guy comes along, he's saying my bride is not a virgin. So Rav Nachman says, give him lashes. Gemara says, but Rav Nachman Huda Amar Mehemi. But then we just say Rav Nachman says above that if he says Pesach Pasuach, we believe him and we take away your ksuba. Gemara says, yeah, that's true. Both could be true. Mehemen, he's believed. Umisabinan like kufri, but we give the guy lashes. We believe him that he knows what he's talking about. But we also say that you've been acting improperly, you've been licentious. So we give him both things. Rav Achai Meshani, Rav Achai gives a different answer. What's the difference between Rav Nachman? Why does he say believe him, but he also says give him lashes? Rav Achai gives a different answer. This is the second time in this tractate we've seen Rav Achai. Remember the first time Rashbam said it was Rav Achai Gon, which was very, very late. Here's another time we see Rav Achai. Would Rashbam say this is Rav Achai Gon? I don't know. So he says, Kam b'bachar, kam b'naso. He says, no. When it's a bachar, when it's a young man, he's not going to be experienced. He's not going to know if it's Pesach Pasuach. Therefore, under those circumstances, when it's a Bachor, he's not going to be experienced, and we're not going to believe him. Whereas Rav Nachman, who he says earlier that we believe him, that's Benasai. That's a guy who was already married before, and so therefore he believes him. So there was a guy a groom came to Rabbi Gamliel. He said, Pesach Pasuach, I found her passageway open. Amarle Shemei Titas. Rabbi Gamliel says, but maybe, this is a little bit graphic, but he says maybe when you had the intercourse, you were angling yourself in. And so therefore you only thought that her Pesach was Pasuach, but it wasn't. So he says, Rabbi Gamliel said to him, Emshol Chamashal. Rabbi Gamliel says, I'll give you a parable. What's it like? A man who's walking to his home in the dark, and there's something in front of him. If he goes in on an angle, if he pushes the door on the side, he'll discover that the door is open. But if he doesn't leave the door on an angle, he'll discover it's closed. Meaning to say, sometimes you can walk through a door and you'll think it's open, other times you'll think it's closed. It depends on your angle. He could alternatively, that Rabbi Gamliel said to this groom, Shema b'mezeri tita. Maybe you angled yourself, and that's why you found it Pesach Pasuach. And maybe you intentionally chose not to rupture her hymen. And therefore, akarto dashav avra, that you took the door off the crossbeam, meaning to say that it was closed, but when you angled in there, you went behind the door, so to speak. You were able to access without breaking her virginity. Like a person who's walking through in the darkness of the night, if he intends to angle himself in, he'll find it open. If he doesn't intend to angle himself in intentionally, he'll find it to be closed. And so therefore, Rabbi Gamliel says, it's not clear to me that even if that maybe you angled yourself in, so it's possible we don't believe you here. So there's a person who came, a groom came to Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi, and he says, Rabbi, he says, Rabbi, I had the wedding intercourse, I didn't find any blood. Rabbi. So the woman says to Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi, Besua Yisi. She says, I promise you, I never committed adultery. I was a Besua. Amram, also Sudar. So Rabbi Gamliel said, bring me the cloth that you used on the wedding night. Eviu Sudar, and he washed it off, and he discovered so that the man's filth was on top of was covering up the blood. And so therefore, when they washed it, they were able to remove the blood. They were able to remove it and clean it, but the blood didn't come out. So therefore, he was able to determine that they were both telling the truth. So Amar Lo said to the groom, he goes, go and you see everybody's okay, basically. You see everybody's telling the truth here, so go and have a good marriage. So he says to him, well, why don't we do the same thing? If a groom comes to us and says, I didn't find blood, and he brings a sheet, why don't we just wash it? And we'll see if there's really blood underneath. He says to him, Rav Ashi said to him, he says, Giyut shalanu kikibu shalam. He says, Giyut, meaning the laundry, the dry cleaning that we do in Babylon, after we wash it, that cleans it bekibu shalam, like the laundry of Eretz Yisrael. But our cleaning in Babylon is not strong enough to wash like them. And so therefore, if we just do what's called a kibus to check the blood, it's not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be sufficient to clean it in order to see if there's blood. And if you say you want to do the heavy cleaning like we do in Babylon, that's going to be too much of a problem because that's going to get off the blood also. So we don't have the proper detergent to get rid of the dirt, but without getting rid of the blood. Fine. There was a person who came in front of Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi and Amarle, Rabbi Ba'alti bo matzasi dam. Says Rabbi, I was with my bride and we didn't find any blood. Amarle, Rabbi, I die in Besuani. She says, that's because I'm still a Besua. Not only was I Besua beforehand, he wasn't successful in breaking my Besua. So therefore I'm still a Besua. So he says, So Amar Lahen, he said to them, "Eviu ishtei shefachos." He says, "Bring me two maids, achas pesua v'achas pua." So Rabbi Gamliel was obviously the expert on this matter. He said, "Bring me two young women. One will be a virgin, and one will be a be'ua." By the way, they're not just a young woman, because no self-respecting Jewish woman would want to do this. So they basically brought two slave women. One was a virgin, and one was not a virgin. Hey, they brought him to him. He put them on a barrel of wine. Be'ula, the girl who was Be'ula, who is not a virgin, Recha Nodev. The barrel of the wine, the smell of the wine went up through her, and it went out through her. Whereas the one who was the virgin, Besua, since she was closed, in Recha Nodev, she stopped the smell of the wine. And then they put this girl who said she was a virgin, they put her on the barrel of the wine, and it stopped the smell. He says she's still a virgin. Go home and enjoy your marriage. So we can't do this anymore today because we don't know. First of all, we're not experts. There was already a takana. We don't apply the medicine from the Talmud to today. They knew you have to. It's like if the doctor would give you a prescription and you would just take the prescription and not apply it exactly the same way, it would be incredibly dangerous. So we don't know exactly all the wine, the barrels. Maybe they were just doing this to go through the motions, but they already knew. Anyway, this was in the Gemara, but we can't do it today. So the Gemara says, "Nivdok mikar begaveh." So why didn't they do this in the beginning? Why didn't he do this with the first bride? Why didn't he do it with the girl who said she was a virgin? Why did he have to bring in the two shvachos, the two maids? The Gemara says, "Gemara avishmiel." No, Rabbi Gamliel bar Rebbe had heard that this works, but he had never saw with his own eyes. He said, maybe I'm not going to know how to do it right. He says, I don't want to cheapen the daughters of Israel in this manner. And so therefore, first I want to make sure I know what I'm doing. He didn't mind doing it to the shvachos, but he wanted to know what he was doing before he did it to the daughters of Israel. So there was a person who came in front of Rabbi Gamliel, the elder. So this is Rabbi Gamliel, the elder, is the grandfather of the Rabbi Gamliel we've been talking about up until now. So Amar Lo, so this person said to Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Ba'alti v'amatzal. He says, I was with my bride on the wedding night, I didn't find any blood. Amar Lo, so she says to him, Rabbi, mi mishpachas dorkati ani. I'm from the family of the Dorkates. She'ein lahen lo dam nida v'lo dam masum. We never have any blood. There's a family, they never had any blood. Well, if that's the case, how do they reproduce? But anyway, that's what he said, they never have any blood. Rabbi Gamliel checked her relatives. He found that this is accurate. He said, that's why she doesn't have blood. Go home and enjoy your wife. He said, you're in luck. She's never going to have any shiloh. She's never going to be having any blood. So it's good for you that she'll never have any blood. I mean, I'm not sure that's the full picture, but maybe he was just telling him, you'll enjoy it. And my Dorkati, what does it mean, Dorkati? Dorkatua, it's a generation that's cut off because since they have no blood, they don't have a lot of children. That's what Rashi says. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, Tanchumim shel Hevel nichamu Rabbi Gamliel. She says Rabbi Gamliel gave him comfort that was meaningless. The Tani Rabbi Chia kashem shasor yafo isa, because we have a teaching, just like yeast is good for the dough. Kach damim yafim l'isha. A woman needs the blood, just like the dough needs yeast. And so it's not. This was a bad blessing that he got. Utana mishemer meir kol isha shedamam merubin banam merubin. If a woman has a lot of blood, she'll have a lot of children. So therefore, it wasn't good that she didn't have blood. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba zacha b'mikachecha marlei. Rabbi Gamliel said, you're married to your betrothed. Rabbi Yossi bar Abba Amar nischayv b'mikachecha marlei. Rabbi Gamliel said, no, you're obligated, meaning to say you have no choice. You married her, you can't get out of it now. It makes sense. It says one who says that you're obligated, meaning to say that's like Rabbi Chanina. He says because it's no good, and so therefore he said you have no choice. The one who says you're meriting it, what merit is there to that she has no blood? It's bad. So the Gemara says, I said this already, that she's not going to come any questions, any halachic questions. That's the merit there. The Rebbe, there was a groom and came in front of Rebbe. Amrle, Rebbe, he said, Rebbe, we had the intercourse, I didn't find any blood. Amrlo, she said, the woman said to Rebbe, Adayim Besua Yisi. She says, Rebbe, that's because I'm still a virgin. And so what did Rebbe do? Shnei B'tzoros Have it was a time of a famine. Rebbe Shepneim Shchorim, he saw that the people's faces were black from the famine. Tziva Olein, so he took them in, he gave them food, gave them a bath. He took them into the room and he said, have the intercourse. And then immediately she had blood. So he says, Amar lo. He says, you see, everything's okay. Kari Rabbi Aleim. So Rabbi said, Safad oram alatzmam yavesha yakaetz. He says their skin stuck to them; it was dry like wood. Meaning to say that as a result of the famine, that's why she didn't have the blood. So now the Mishnah tells us, Besula. We're up to the second Mishnah of Kesubos. After Daf Yomi Abayz, we come to Mishnah number 2. Besula Kesuva Masayim Amana Mana. A Besula, her Kesuva is 200 zuz. She gets 200 zuz if the husband dies or divorces her, whereas the widow gets 100. Besua, Besua, that is an almana. Let's say she was a virgin, but she was also a widow. I mean, she was betrothed, but her husband died before they got married, or grusha, or she was divorced. V'chalutza min ha'erisin, or she did chalitza also just from the betrothal. Ksuvasa matayim, then she gets the full 200. And she could also, if he's with her and he says she's not a virgin, he can make the claim that you weren't a virgin and take away her ksuba. Mara says, "My almana, what is an almana? Amar Chana Bagdata almana al shem mana, because she has mana, because she accepts her ksuba for 100. That's why she's called an almana, the widow almana." Mara says, "Almana mina irusin." What about if she's a widow from the Erusin? She gets 200 Ma'ikal Mamers. And Gemara says, no. Yeah, you're right. That's true. But because they call the widow from the full marriage a widow, they also call this one from the Erusin a widow. Gemara says, well, if that's the case, what about the fact that it says Almana in the Torah? And if you say Ksuba is rabbinic, then why is the one in the Torah called an Almana? If you're saying she's called an Almana because she gets Almana 100, but what about in the Torah? It's before the rabbis instituted. Why is she called an almana? Where it says no, because in the future the rabbis are going to establish that she gets almana. So that's why in the Torah they called her almana based upon the future. So the Gemara says, does the Torah really speak like that? The Torah is going to give somebody a name on the future because it knows that the rabbis are going to institute this in, yes, and the Gemara gives examples of this because it says it says the third river to come out of the Garden of Eden was Chidekel. It was going to Kidmas Asher. Tana Rav Yosef, Asher is Slika. And was there Slika in the time of the creation of the world? That the Torah is going to say Chidekel is the east of this city. Ela da Atida. So it's rather speaking towards the future. It's speaking to the future. So now that we taught something in the name of Rav Chana Bagdata, we'd say other things that he said. Rav Chana Bagdata, Matar, Mashke, Umarva, Umazabel, Umaaden, Umamshich. Matar, which is rain, has so many benefits. What does it do? We had this Gemara. Where do we have this Gemara already? We had this Gemara. No, they don't say it. This is the only time. And what does it do? It's Marva. It's mashke, it waters the earth and it fertilizes it and it makes it very plentiful, umamshich, and causes the fruits to come forth. What's the verse? It's furrows ravei nachas, that they are overflowing. With the drops of rain, you'll fertilize the earth. Its blossoms will be blessed. Amar Elazar Mizbeach, an altar Maziach, it removes the sins. Umazin, it nourishes the world. Mechabeb, and it brings Israel closer to their Father in heaven. Mechaper, and it is atonement for their sins. So the Gemara says, Hainu mechaper, hainu maziach. Isn't atonement the same as removing the sins? No, maziach gezeros and mechaper avonos. Maziach removes the decrees, and mechaper atonement removes the sins. Ramar Chana Bagdata Tamri. If you have dates, mishachnan, it warms up the body. Maspan mishalshan ma'ashran v'lo mefankan. It makes you feel full. It causes you to have diarrhea. It strengthens your body, but it's not for those who are mefunak, who are very careful about what to eat. And Amarav, Achal Tamarim, if you eat dates, al yora, you're not allowed to give up psak halacha. You can't pass him because you become weak at that point. Our challenge is this: Meisvei Tamarim Shachar v'Arvas Yafos b'Mincha Rose. Doesn't it say that if you have dates in the morning and the evening, it's good? If you have them in the afternoon, it's bad. B'Tzarayim, and if you eat them in the afternoon, in Kamosin, there's nothing as good as that. Gemara says, and dates knock out three things. If you eat them in the afternoon, it gets rid of bad thoughts, meaning nervousness. It gets rid of stomach ache and hemorrhoids. Gemara says, yeah, it helps. So meaning to say, they're good for the body, but at the moment that you eat them, you need like you need a few minutes because you get all concerned. Like wine. That if you drink wine can also be good for the body, but you can't give up psak after drinking wine. You buy sema or another answer. It depends if you eat it with bread or not. Abayi's mother said, this was his adopted mother. He was raised by his nurse. Tamri mikmei nama. If you eat dates before you eat bread, ki nargo adikua. It's like if you're taking an axe to the branches of a tree. Bazar nama ki avro adasha. If you eat it after bread, it's like you put a crossbeam in a door. It holds the door up. Dasha marava. What is the word dasha? Rava says it means derech sham. That's how you go into the house. Darga, which we call a ladder. Amarava derech gag, the way to the roof. Puria, which we call a bed. Amar papa sheparan v'ravan aleh. You're fruitful and multiply upon it. Amar Nachum bar Yitzchak afanu nemar ilonis duchrinis yada. And an ilonis, we had this a lot in Yevamos, is a male ram that cannot give birth. All right, we're going to on Shabbos Kodesh. We're going to learn after Kiddush on Shabbos morning. We're going to learn before Kiddush, and then in the afternoon, 6:45 is Pirkei Avos. 7:30 is the Daf Yomi. Well, anybody have any questions about anything we said?